Right. Hi, and welcome everyone to this webinar called Getting Started with Enterprise Design. I'm Milan Günther. You see me here at home in Paris, where I live. And yeah, this is a webinar by the Intersection Group. We are a not-for-profit association that has the goal to help people create better enterprises. And so that's what we call enterprise design. Behind our logo, you see the Milky Way, which is one of the techniques that I will mention today that we use, but also our galaxy. And this is the first of a new series of webinars that we will deliver over the next 2 months, more or less. So today is the Getting Started one. Then we have next week Bart Papagai on enterprise design impact patterns, and early January about behavioral patterns. We have Wolfgang with goal portfolio management and capability maps. I'm also very happy about Jim Kalbach. He's the author of the Jobs to be Done playbook and mapping experiences to join me for a webinar on the customer-driven enterprise in early February. And then we will get into more of a storytelling mode. I will talk about the story of a service designer making their way into enterprise design. Wolfgang will do the same with an enterprise architect, and we have Naomi Stanford. She's the author of The Economist Guide to Organization Design that will come out in about a month, the new edition. So she will tell the story of an organization designer making their way into enterprise design. And then we get more concrete into changes to enterprise architecture practice, the Milky Way enterprise map that I mentioned before, and our upcoming graphical language for collaborative enterprise design. So with every season, we get a little bit more to talk about. So all of that is in line with our first book called Enterprise Design Patterns. This is how we see and define the practice of enterprise design that includes or touches upon, rather than includes, I would say, the design of better organizations, better services, better business architectures, better operating models, and how to do that. So the book contains 35 patterns to do so. Today, I will not so much talk about those patterns. That's what the pattern webinars are for, but rather how to actually get started. Like, why would you look into enterprise design? And what are some easy ways to get started doing this in practice with the enterprises that you work within and work with. So here are some of the patterns. Anyway, I want to ask you a question up front, which is, why do you think Amazon is so successful at what they're doing? And for doing that, I would ask you to click on the link that I now post into the chat here, or you can scan the QR code, or you can type somewhere i-g.at/vote. And tell us, what do you think? Why is Amazon so successful at what they are doing? What is the reason? So they are fast, pragmatic, and lean. Yeah, they have good products. They haven't, AI is an interesting answer. Very broad offering. Okay, we have 2 leans, 2 AIs. The pricing, the platform, leveraging others, which I think has to do with the platform. The customer experience, the reviews, end-to-end processes, platform ecosystem. They improve continuously what they are doing. It's easy to use. You can get anything you want. They deliver fast. yeah, and so yeah, what we have in there is nimble, scale, all sorts of things. So I think that's a little bit what I'm getting at with this question. It's hard to pinpoint one reason. And we are all working, and I assume that you are probably also working in environments where we like simple answers to quite complicated questions. Like, okay, what makes us really successful? Is it lean startup? Is it agile at scale? Is it 42? Is it being really good at operations? Is it knowing our customers really well and serving them really well? Is it a broad range of products and services? There are stories about Amazon, right? So so I have a user experience design background in service design, coming from that angle into enterprise design, and in my original field, there's a legend called the one-click button. So at some point, Amazon introduced the functionality to just buy something with one click. And allegedly, the developer charged with implementing this button couldn't believe the requirement first and implemented a security question. Are you sure you want to buy this? Making it effectively 2 clicks. And well, that wasn't the spec, so they got rid of the security question and just removed kind of the whole checkout process. And this has been known as the $1 million button. There are articles about this from about 10, 15 years ago, because it boosted Amazon's revenue just by introducing this button, actually not adding any features, but removing them. You have other stories, about the platform ecosystem kind of stopping to sell things themselves, but rather activating everyone else to buy and sell between them. We have the customer experience. You have the use of data, AI, being native digital. You have the operational excellence. You have predictive analysis, all sorts of things. There's another legend in enterprise architecture, where basically Amazon for Christmas looked at all the stuff that they got for Christmas, basically, when everyone wants to buy lots of stuff for their loved ones. So every Christmas they had to, and every Black Friday, I guess, they had to deal with a huge peak in usage data. And the rest of the year they didn't. So they had a lot of infrastructure, a lot of computing power, and basically looked into the basement, looked at their capabilities, and found, well, there's lots of stuff that we actually don't use all the year. Let's make a business out of that, and launched AWS. And now AWS is actually more profitable than the e-commerce business, because it's a different business model. So looking at the existing capabilities and doing something with what you can do well, rather than always looking at the market. Let me just look. What we don't have in here is exploiting workers or warehouse scandals or all sorts of things, right? So enterprises are not necessarily always admired. There's a good question from Antonio, like, how do we define success? And that's a good question. So that's also a question that I want to raise here. What is actually a better enterprise? What is a good enterprise? What is a well-designed enterprise? So thank you for this. Going back to the presentation. And by the way, what you see there on the Amazon screenshot is the first book I wrote in 2012 called Intersection. This has been the root of everything we're doing. The Intersection Group, the Intersection Conference, at least from a brand name perspective. And what you see on that book are icons, 20 icons. And those icons are actually representing a lot of the aspects that we just talked about. We have the identity, the architecture, the experience, the content, the business, the interaction design, the operating model, the organization design, the communications, the functional and structural nature, and so on. And what we talk about today is actually the successor of this original model, which we call the enterprise design facets. So thank you for this. So these are the enterprise design facets that we use to navigate enterprise challenges and also enterprise opportunities. We gave every single of them an icon. So there are three main facets that we use and that we just talked about, which is the identity. Why do we exist? Who are we? What's all of this for? We have in blue the architecture, which is, if I really oversimplify it, how does it all work? How does it fit together? How do we operate? What kind of assets do we use? What can we do? What are our capabilities? And in red, we have the experience, which is, what do we do for people? How do we appear in people's lives? And what value do we offer for them? And then we have at the intersections, we have more concrete manifestations of the same enterprise, which is our organization. So taking our identity forward and building an architecture out of it, which means deciding who does what, how do we work together, how do we take decisions, which is our organization. We have how we appear in people's lives. With the help of our architecture, we can make products and services, which is, we call that products in again, a simplified manner. So what do we make and offer? This also determines how this experiences that we are designing or trying to influence in people's lives also determine how our identity translates to a brand that appears in people's lives. And importantly, we always look at the same enterprise, just with different lenses. So these are not separate things, actually. They are together, which is why the true nature of the enterprise is only visible if you actually look at it with the white lens in the middle. You look at everything at once. But this is a lot of stuff, right? You would ask, okay, what's our purpose? Why do we exist? What are the goals? What are the capabilities? What are the processes? What are the products? What are the services? What are the customer jobs to be done or tasks? What are the journeys? What's our brand image? What's the brand message? And everything at once. So again, how would we know if an enterprise is well designed? And as we saw before with Amazon, it's actually not that easy. Right, so we can see if an enterprise that appears in our lives, maybe you're a customer of Amazon, or maybe they sell your book like they do mine, and we can say, okay, are they useful for me? Do I like what they do? Do I like what they stand for? Do I have an idea why, if I would say they are successful and they are well designed, why that is? And we saw just, we have a lot of very different ideas. So if you want to look at whether or not an enterprise is well designed, sometimes it helps to do the opposite and look at enterprises that are not well designed. And this is where it comes to what we call enterprise awkwardness. So here you see a pile of bikes. Again, the legend says it's somewhere in China, and some enterprise really just messed up. We don't know exactly what happened. Maybe it's a logistics problem, or a planning problem, or a capacity problem, a demand management problem. Maybe it's planned obsolescence. Maybe it's a quality problem, so all these bikes are broken. But we can kind of look at the outcome that this enterprise produced and say, whoa, that's bad. Like, no one can actually want this. And we are collecting stories of enterprises doing this kind of stuff, like producing really bad outcomes. And we call that enterprise awkwardness. So the enterprise, instead of doing something useful, doing something awkward, like, for example, producing this pile of junk. Enterprise awkwardness can also render in your daily life. This is actually from my daily life here in Paris. This is the Vélib app. Vélib is the public bike rental service here in Paris. And this is an earlier version of the home screen that you got when you opened it on your phone, and you see that where like around my my flat, it's in the northeast. There are some bikes, right? But it doesn't show me really anything useful. It shows me that there are also bikes on the other side of Paris, or even outside Paris. And this is nothing that is in any way interesting for me in this moment. So this is basically bad user experience design, right? But so, okay, they changed it actually. What you would do in this earlier version is something that is actually now happening automatically, which is they show you the bikes available for rent around you. And you see, this is what I see usually when I look in around my flat. 0, 0, 0, 0. Why is that? It's because this area is a little bit hilly. So everyone is taking bikes and going down the hill. No one is taking bikes and going up the hill. Now, what is the user experience or the customer experience of this service? Is it the app? Or is it actually getting from A to B using bikes so that you don't have to take the metro, you don't have to get a cab, you don't have to take a long walk? So if you look at the actual task that I want to solve with the help of this enterprise, including the app, but also the bikes themselves, this is a big failure. Now, what is usually the scope of a user experience designer that is working on this? It's just the app. And there's no way this enterprise will ever get any better at serving me, in this case, by only looking at the experience of a certain part of this, which is the app. They have to look into operations. They maybe could explore incentivation. And to be honest, they did. It's just not really easy to solve as an operational problem. But this is one of the messages that I have for service and UX designers. If you want to actually make great experiences happen, you have to look at the operations and the organization and what is being done by the enterprise that is supposed to deliver those experiences. Other than that, you might make a great app, but in the end fail when delivering the service. This is enterprise awkwardness appearing in a customer life, so in a customer experience context. So it's a useless enterprise in this case. You might know other instances of the same, like for example, if you call enterprises, this is a comic for like what usually happens when you call some of them, like right now they make you listen to Celine Dion, ask you some very awkward questions, I really like this one. Have you or your loved ones or your family pet been struck by lightning in the past 24 hours? We all have been there and been in these kind of customer experience failures. Enterprise awkwardness can also render internally. This is an example actually from one of my clients with my consultancy business. I will not tell you which one. And this is in the bathroom. And what you see there is a light, and the light has been switched off. And then they have this sign saying, for energy saving reasons, this light has been permanently switched off. And then there's some logo referring to the Kyoto Protocol to save the planet. And this is very nice. This is actually so what happened there is that you have a CSR department, right? Social responsibility, looking into sustainability, looking into climate and so on. And they are doing a lot of things. Like, for example, they are turning off lights. But if they just remove the light, no one would notice that they exist. So what better touch point to actually reach all the colleagues, all the other employees, and brag about their existence and what they are doing, establish basically an internal brand by saying, you look at this light, we switched it off. And they did that with this 4-color laminated print, telling you that they switched off the light. And this is, again, quite awkward. And often when you look at enterprise awkwardness, it could help if you think about if this was a person Like if I called my friend and they would make me wait and forget who I am and make me switch between different personalities, or they offer me some product and service and it never works, or they put these signs and say, look, this is what great stuff I'm doing, mostly on social media these days. It's awkward, and it's the same for enterprises. Just for enterprises, sometimes people don't notice. They don't notice anymore. And sometimes enterprise awkwardness gets even covered in mainstream media, like in Bloomberg Business Week in this case. And here they talk about United Airlines, and you have again a catalog of enterprise awkwardness symptoms: unhappy employees, delayed flights, right? So it's again operational failures, tech meltdowns. I'm sure the architects and the analysts in the crowd are familiar with that, or also inappropriate behavior, which has to do more with organization and people, like gifts for public officials. And what I really like in this one is the main headline: United's quest to be less awful. They're not actually saying to be great, performing, successful, top-notch customer experience, something like that. Something that is for sure in some of the PowerPoints and on some parts of the website or the annual reports that they publish. No, it's just be less awful. Try that. So why are these enterprise awkwardness things happening? And it has to do with the nature of enterprises. This is from a movie called Office Space that is collecting a lot of the situations that lead to enterprise awkwardness. And it might look like this, right? You have an overworked, disengaged employee in a cubicle, surrounded by too much stuff, too much formality, weird relationships, weird ways to take decisions, arbitrary or too hierarchical, we might need to actually look at the enterprises themselves, and that means we can't actually only look at the products and services or the experience of the customer or the employee. We cannot only look at the organization, because a lot of this has to do with technical systems, with debt, with structures, with assets that we are using, or also compliance and processes and things like that. We cannot only look at the brand. We cannot only look at the identity, the purpose, the vision, the mission, and these kind of things. We have to look at how these things work together and fit together, and whether all of them are actually going into some coherent direction. It might also be because of the enterprise might be distracted because of these people. They come in and the executives ask, okay, what should we do this year? And they say blockchain. It will change everything. It has endless applications. You can't afford to not look into that. What exactly is blockchain? Also AI. So before they can actually get their head around anything, the next trend comes along, and especially in IT and digital, what we often see is enterprises hunting trends rather than going for any kind of meaningful change. This is an example from our friends from the Ready. They are into organization design and designing better organizations. So they collected this list of things, asking in a lot of their trainings, is this something that you are familiar with? Like, do people insist on doing everything through channels? Don't permit any shortcuts. Always do everything by the book. Have lots of committees, boards, review cycles and institutions. Always going for further study and consideration. Have as many people as possible invited in the committees. Haggle over really, like, what exactly do we mean by the word function, by the word capability, by the word application, by the word asset, and so on, and spend hours and hours defining things. Always going back to the last meeting, saying, okay, can we look at this again, because I'm really not sure whether we are confident on this, and have as many procedures and clearances as possible. And many people say, yeah, that's actually happening in my enterprise. So where's this list coming from? And the answer is, it's coming from the simple sabotage field manual by the CIA declassified in 2012, I think. And it is a manual on how to effectively sabotage an enemy business. So if you were working in a German company during the Second World War, and you wanted to help the American side, this is what the CIA wanted you to do in order to sabotage the business. And it is quite astonishing that many decades later we see the symptoms that have been so nicely defined still hampering us from actually having effective enterprises, even without the Cold War logic behind it. And of course, we have the spaghetti, right? So this is one of my co-presidents, Wolfgang's favorite pictures, because it shows even, I think, a medium-sized enterprise and what is happening in there in terms of systems being used and integrations. It is, I think, deliberately blurry so that we can't see who it is exactly. A bit similar to the bathroom picture. What I'm asking myself for this picture is like, what is this model for exactly? And I think the answer is not planning or dealing with change in the IT landscape. It's actually scaring people. So whenever there's an ambitious person in the enterprise who says, we need to change a lot of things, we need to make the customer experience better, or we need to innovate, or we need to become digital or transform ourselves, the IT architects can pull out this picture and say, okay, what exactly do you want to change? Are you sure? Like, can we, like, who's paying for this? These systems are actually owned by that and that guy. Do you want to actually mess with them? Do you want to go into that turf? And do you want to risk the fallout if we actually change things? And we have seen a lot of these pictures, and it's one of the main reasons why many of our clients in my business, but also of our members in the group, are actually shying away from trying to actually radically improve things in their own enterprise and would rather start a new one next door on the green field, pretend that they are a startup. But actually, one of the numbers that I found interesting in the recent over the recent years was that the digital business for most enterprises is actually not that much. It doesn't take so much of their part of their revenue yet. So it's hyped a lot, but the number that I have heard is something like 5%. So only 5% of the revenue is actually generated through digital business, and the rest is still the old business, basically. And this is even though we are talking about digital transformation and digital business now for so long. I have the feeling that very often there's an investment being made in making new innovative products and services, trying new things, but shying away from changing anything that we have today just because of this mess and just because of we might not want to go into the pain and agony to actually change our organization, our ways, our IT landscape, and so on. So how to actually do this, how to change, or how to redesign an enterprise. And this is a quote from a blog from Gartner from 2017, so already a few years back, where they basically say enterprise architecture needs to become design-driven. And what do they mean by that? They talk about design thinking. Design thinking is about putting the customer at the center instead of, for example, the operations or the IT or the capabilities or the internal, the inside-out view. That they say, okay, no, let's actually use an outside-in view. Let's look at it from the customer, design a great solution for the customer, and then link that solution to traditional architecture pieces. And what we found often quite painfully in our projects is that this doesn't work. Because the solution you design for the customer will probably not fly. because it's probably too late to actually make it compatible with a meaningful change that is achievable within the constraints that might be budget, that might be political, that might be technical, that might be time-wise. Like how much time do you have until you get threatened by, for example, startups, or like if you're a bank like a fintech or something like that, to make this change happen. So what we basically see is that instead of doing this, instead of then linking the architect pieces to the solution, we have to look at the architecture, the organization, the delivery, the enterprise itself, basically, as part of our design process. We cannot only look at generating great ideas, investing in innovation, and then when we have a great solution, look at what do we want to change. And this has to do with, again, what are we actually going for here? So this is these are 10 principles for good design that Dieter Rams came up with a long time ago. He's an industrial designer, so making basically products, physical products. And he came up with these 10 principles, saying good design is the following. It's innovative, so it should be new in a way. It should be useful. It should be aesthetic. It should make things understandable, be unobtrusive, be honest, long-lasting, thorough, but also as little design as possible, and not destroying the environment. And here's an update from 2017. Interestingly, the same year that Gartner said we need to do design in order to figure out how to architect changes for our enterprise. And this clearly comes from a very frustrated UX designer from the tech industry, saying, okay, good design is actually what they asked me to do is be disruptive, make products addicting, do lots of A/B tests, collect data, send people notifications, make them agree to terms and conditions, only look at the next quarter, because then everything will change anyway, make a prototype, don't care about the details, make a chatbot, because chatbots is what people do now, and please your shareholders. And so in order to actually get to enterprises that are better and that deliver on their promises, we have to challenge this, and we have to look at, okay, how do we design enterprises that are actually adhering to these things, but also changes to the way things are being done today that are actually possible. And here's a quote from Daniel Ek. He is the CEO of Spotify. There's an interview on Fast Company where he actually asks, if we judge enterprises, and this comes back to the whole discussion of awkwardness, purpose, identity, experience in people's lives that enterprises create, and also architecture in the way an organization, like how do things actually work? Not only what they say, but what do they actually do? And he asked, is it actually enough if an enterprise is not criminal? Or should we hold them accountable to a higher standard than that? Kind of like we do with people also, right? Because in the end, enterprises, behind an enterprise, usually there's a legal entity. That legal entity is an organization. And this organization is a group of people. So in the end, they are people. In the end, decisions like what do we want to pursue, our purpose, what investments do we make, how do we want to appear in people's lives, and how should things work? It's people taking these decisions. So how to actually design better enterprises? There are many, many ways to do so. Here are just a few, right? So again, Gartner saying, okay, you might try to integrate design thinking with lean startup and agile. We have agile at scale. That is mostly about delivering big IT and software at scale. We have the innovation matrix by the Board of Innovation, where you have a very different approach, but to a very similar challenge. So how do we make change happen at scale? And you could have an internal incubator. You might train people. You might have centers of excellence. You might have a venture fund. You might buy startups. On On the top right, you have an organization design model, the STAR model, where you say, okay, we might have to look into our structure, our people, the reward systems, the processes, the strategy. And we have enterprise architecture approaches like TOGAF, the TOGAF cycle, where you basically look at what's the vision, and how do we translate this vision into a business architecture, into IT and information systems and tech architectures, and then implementing changes. Or the BISBOK from the Business Architecture Guild, looking at, again, different things. And you might say these are apples and oranges, and in a way they are, right? Because they are looking at very different facets also in our model. Do you have an innovation mindset, or do you have an implementation or a execution mindset, or an organizational change mindset? And depending on this worldview, basically, you will do different things. But the point here is you will do different things given the same problem. If you want to change the customer experience, if you want to introduce successful products and services, if you want to change the things that are being done, if you want to make things more effective, if you want to change the business model, people will use approaches not necessarily suited to the challenge, but suited, or they will use the ones that they're used to. And this is basically what we are about, is to give you a model or some tools to actually look at it from different lenses and see, okay, which of these approaches do we actually want to use to tackle that challenge, and who do we need to talk to? So yeah, I think this is the only definition. Well, actually, it's one of the two definition slides I have. So what is enterprise design? And this is just to debunk some of the myths that we usually get. It's not necessarily the design of large software applications for professionals. It's also not necessarily complicated, awful, and expensive. It overlaps heavily with things like business design, business architecture, enterprise architecture, and organization design, and even service and product design. But so what is it actually? And the shortcut that we are taking here, that is heavily inspired by Lou Down when they talk about what is service design. Enterprise design is the design of enterprises. So the enterprise, if we want a well-designed enterprise design is making that happen. So what is an enterprise? Len Feskens, who was for a long time the chief editor of the Journal of Enterprise Architecture, says an enterprise is an ambitious endeavor. So it's not necessarily the company, the organization, the business, the legal entity. It is why these things exist. What do you want to achieve? What can you do, and what do you want to do? And what is design? Jared Spool, who is one of the people behind the term user experience, says design is the rendering of intent. So you have some intent, you want to make something happen. The rendering being, how will this manifest in the world for people so that they can see it, use it, touch it, and get value out of it. So this rendering of intent is what we design in the end. If it's not visible, if it's not there, tangible in some way, in pixels or in rooms or in whatever, it doesn't exist. So it's more than just planning. And if we combine that, so we are designing for making this intent behind our ambitious endeavor actually manifest in the world. And of course, this has to do with design thinking, right? I would say actually that system thinking, design thinking are core ingredients of doing enterprise design. However, there is a certain distinction, and this has to do with the adoption of design thinking these days in enterprises. So what we often see is this kind of room where you have a designer or design thinking consultant and some team from the enterprise, and you have lots of observations, user insights, you have lots of ideas on different post-its, insights, and this is all very great, but it leads to the misconception that design thinking is about creating lots of ideas, inspired by your own thinking, and if it's practiced in a serious way, observation and insight from the field, from the people that you are designing for in their lives. And that is correct, but I want to show you this picture, which is from an architecture class, people learning how to architect buildings from a US college. And what you see there is a student presenting a concept for a building, and you see there are many models on the wall. You have blueprints, you have visualizations and renderings, you have vertical plans, you have plans of the environment, the urban environment, the infrastructure, usage predictions, aesthetic, visualizations. And so making multiple models of the same thing, of this building, looking at it from different perspectives, from different facets in our model. Making prototypes, like physical representations, so that we can actually get a feeling for how would it work, how would it fit in the environment, how would we walk around it, walk inside it. And you have these people who are probably it's a committee of professors. And I know I was kind of skeptical about committees earlier, but the point here being is there is critique. Have you thought of this? Did you try that? Have you looked at what this other architect did? Maybe you should. How do these two aspects work together? Like if you take this decision when it comes to the infrastructure, what does it mean for the aesthetic? What does it mean for the use? Asking really hard questions in a space where there is no optimal solution. So if people say there's an optimal enterprise design, there's an optimal customer experience, there's an optimal enterprise architecture, we believe no, there isn't. There's probably a good design, and it's quite tough to find it. In order to find it, and good being something that works for you, for your clients, for your users, for your customers, for your stakeholders, for your shareholders, for like something that everyone can live with and everyone thinks, whoa, this is actually a good solution, is probably not an optimal one. It is it's a decision, a series of decisions in a space full of trade-offs, and exploring that space with a critical eye is what we call design. If you go to design school, you go every day, and you get before you go, you have to make lots of drawings and concepts and designs, if you want. And the experience basically is you get it smashed for 4 or 5 years, and you, by doing that, you reflect on what is actually a good design. And it depends, of course, what kind of design you're studying. If it's service design, you will learn something quite different from if you are learning industrial design, you're looking into what's a good car, what's a good building, what's good furniture, what's a good app, what's a good website. But in the end, what it boils down to is we learn judging whether or not what we are designing might be something worth actually manifesting, rendering in the world, and might be something that we want to see, and all the people we are designing with also want to see. And so so we think that this needs to come back into enterprise design. We have to look at these questions, these hard questions. If we want to do something, if we want to change something, why? What actually matters really? How do we do it? What can we do? How will it work? How will it operate? And what will it be like for people? People like our customers, but maybe also our partners, our employees, our investors. And what can we offer them? How do we want to be perceived? How are we being perceived today? And how do we want to work together? So this is the true scope of enterprise design. This is just a preview of some tools. And if you are interested in those tools, I invite you to join the further webinars in this series. This is, for example, a preview of Edgy. Edgy is the language that we're working on for modeling and mapping enterprises, because we know that mapping and modeling enterprises is different from mapping or modeling buildings or even IT landscapes. So here you have a set of elements that we often use when modeling enterprises, like the purpose, the story that it tells, the customer or other people's journeys, what kind of channels we use to reach them, our processes and capabilities, and how we use assets. And then at the intersections, our organization design, our product design, our brand design. And you see that we reference here the FBS ontology. So I will talk about that next year in the Edgy webinar in more detail. Here you have some definitions. We will share the slides afterwards for you to look at. And second question to you: when you model and map, whatever you model and map in your work, what do you actually model and map? And again, if you just go to the same URL as before, and you just select quickly which of these models and maps do you frequently use and make in your work. I will put here we go. So we have application architectures, capability maps, customer journey maps, personas. We have a service blueprint, the business model canvas. And I know this is a multiple choice one, so maybe you have some that we forgot here. If so, you can of course mention them in the chat, but I couldn't add any more with the limitation of these tools. Yeah, so we have 6 process maps, 4 capability maps, 4 application architectures, which are more the enterprise and business architecture maps. We have 6 customer journey maps and 2 personas, 2 service blueprints, which are more I think service and experience designers usually make, but I think they are also getting adopted. We have a few domain and data models and 2 org charts. So what you see here is that even though we might have similar challenges, we are actually making quite different models and maps. One goal that we have with the tools that we publish is actually enable people to translate between those views, and the facet model is for that really, really important. Yes, Wordly maps. I actually had those included in another version of this. Sorry that it's missing. We actually use them also a lot. Anyway, thank you for this vote. It's a good overview. So in order to wrap up and have 5 minutes for discussion, I want to leave you with a little toolkit. It's a preview of the intersection toolkit that we are working on. And I will post the URL in the chat. It's a Google Drive folder. And in there you find 5 components, as I said, as a sneak preview of our tools. We call it the starter kit. So you have a description of the facets that I mentioned. You have a tool for doing research and exploring the enterprise and its environments. You have a tool for making maps of the enterprise and the language, the Edgy language that I mentioned. You have an overview of an enterprise design sprint, which is a workshop format to, if you know maybe design sprints, it's similar, but instead of making products and services, we are looking at changing the enterprise. And you have an enterprise design system. And all of that follows this idea that the enterprise is a complex environment. It is difficult to predict, but that is at the same time good and bad, because that means we can actually show the right model in the right moment to the right people, influence some decisions, have conversations, make conversations happen. And so the tools are basically designed to help us do that. So the facets, the scan, the maps, the sprint, and the systems And just to give you a little preview, so here we have the facets with the description of what we mean by each of the icons and how they, what kind of questions they entail. You have the maps, like especially the Milky Way map, which is a format that has been invented by one of our core members, Annika Kleiber in Sweden, where we look at how to combine the identity, like the purpose of the enterprise with its architecture and things like customer experiences, top tasks and journeys. We have the sprint, we have the scan, where we look at what are qualitative, quantitative, or data-driven and documentation, like desk research-driven techniques that we can use to find out about the enterprise and its environment, and some templates for doing that. We have the sprint format, where you have a typical sprint process, going from understanding the problem to defining what you want to solve, the challenges, sketching potential solutions, deciding which ones to prototype and testing them. And again, what you would do depending on what kind of facet you prioritize based on your context and challenge. And finally, the enterprise design system, which is a collection of components that you can share in your team or across your organization if you want other people to adopt this kind of approach, like design principles, patterns to be reused, components, and platforms. Wrapping up, so we are a not-for-profit association. We are working on the Intersection Toolkit. We are also looking to relaunch our Intersection Conference series next year, probably in September in Stockholm. We hope it will work this time. We are generating learning and knowledge products. And if you are interested in getting involved in this, presenting, writing, discussing, reviewing, as we create these tools, please get in touch. We create those. These are some of the products that we create, including also training courses. And here you get all the links to the book, to both of the books, to the starter kit, to the conference videos from the past, and to our Slack if you want to join. And the last question for you: will you try it? Will you try an enterprise design approach? And with that, I will look at some of the questions, if there are any. What's the difference between this framework and the IBM Enterprise Design Thinking Framework? I think except for the name and a certain overlap in scope, it's a different framework. So it's not the same. I am familiar with theirs. I think it is, for me, it's a variant of a design thinking framework for more enterprisey challenges, but it is actually, in terms of scope, in terms of tools, just actually a different framework with a partially same name. I will take that barbecue sauce, Brandon. Thank you. Any other questions? So one question is, when is the certification class going to happen? So right now we are offering 1 week trainings. We don't offer certification yet. I think I can actually go into some kind of Q&A mode here. Here we go. So this is the question I'm trying to answer right now. We are planning a curriculum to offer certification, I guess next year or the year after. It depends a little bit on the R&D part that goes into the toolkit. But there is already training. So you can get trained in all the tools as far as they have been defined, because like we don't see this as a waterfall in that like all of these tools are already in productive use. We are basically merely documenting them and trying to connect and better connect and drive adoption. Are we collaborating with tool vendors? Yes, we are. So we have 4 enterprise architecture tool vendors that are currently looking into implementing Edgy. I think that might happen quite quickly as soon as we publish it. We want to publish it early next year, so quite soon. We also have already support for, you could say, more low key tools, or maybe not low key, but more less structured tools, like for example Draw.io, that you can for example combine with a wiki like Confluence to manage your content. We have support for PowerPoint and slides, obviously, and there will be also support for Miro and Mural. How is the enterprise design model evolving to include ecosystem design? This is a very good question. So we look here at the enterprise and its environment as the scope of this kind of design. What that means is we sometimes need to zoom out and zoom in. So when we zoom out, we basically look at the ecosystem, the actors, things like different customers, different partners or customer segments, different business lines, suppliers, or even competition. And the idea is that in Edgy, you will be able to model that. You will be able to model these relationships. But then we need to translate whatever we find and discuss and decide and get to when looking at the ecosystem into changes to things like our purposes, our capabilities, our products and services, our organization. And there we actually have to often zoom in into more detailed questions, for example, how do we want to organize ourselves? Who's doing what? So we want to actually allow that bridge to be easily traversable and allow people and practitioners to zoom in, zoom out, and collaborate. So one question is, how do we deal with the complexity of this kind of environment and this kind of approach? Because you're talking about complexity, I think there is no simple answer. But my answer is actually make things visible and enable conversations. Because no single mind, no brilliant enterprise designer, business designer, organization designer, consultant, architect or so will be able to see the whole system, will be able to deal with the whole complexity. So whatever we are doing, when we are gathering evidence, when we are collecting, for example, elements to map, insights to base on, when we are mapping what we find, right? How are elements interacting? What are the dependencies? What are the influences? And we are generating potential solutions, right? That's what design is doing. We are not actually trying to improve or optimize. We are generating options to choose from. Should we do this or should we rather do this? And this is what this would entail, and this is why we should do this rather than that. If we manage to enable these conversations, then we help the enterprise deal with complexity. That would be my answer on this. All right, we are out of time. There are, I think, no more questions. Thank you for joining, and thank you for your comments. We will send out the slides and the recording afterwards. And please join us on Slack and join the discussion, and have an excellent day or evening.